Hi again then guys, and welcome to the 51st episode of Weekend Warriors on GranTurismo 6, at least for the moment. And this particular car is one which, if you have clicked on this video, and of course if you're hearing this you obviously have, you probably don't have exceedingly high expectations for this car. It's a vehicle which is kind of a joke. Many vehicles like this have not done very well. Cars which are way out there as far as design have not sold that well. Surprisingly, I would have thought that people would like a car that's different, radically different, but it just doesn't work that way. Many vehicles which have dared to be different have just failed because of it. Pontiac has made some cars like that, Plymouth has, various other manufacturers as well, and not just American companies, of course. Plenty of other manufacturers as well, be it Japanese or European, have done similar things. Now this car is of course the Plymouth Prowler, or the Chrysler Prowler, and it's an interesting looking car. You can safely say it's pretty unique. It's totally unique, in fact. It's kind of like a hot rod as far as production cars go, one of the only true modern hot rods, if you will, and it's one of the very few cars on the market to have an open wheel design, of course primarily on the front end. There are relatively few cars to have that. You've got stuff like the Ariel Atom or the Caterham, but apart from those very select few, generally speaking, kit cars or ready-made track day specials, there really isn't much else. This one, though, does, of course, have that, but unlike those vehicles, it's a much bigger, much heavier car with a larger engine, and not necessarily as much of a focus on sheer track performance. So the question is, what does it offer, at least on GranTurismo? Because of course on the game we can upgrade the cars in ways which people never would in real life. You can have access to certain parts which you would never use to fit to these cars, race spec things which would frankly be wasted on some of the cars which we build on the game. Nobody would spend that kind of money on these kind of cars in the real world. And that's one of the great things about the game. It allows you to explore those dream builds, if you will. This, for me, is one of those. It's not a dream car, it's not a car which I even particularly like that much, but what it is a vehicle which actually managed to surprise me. Because often with cars that are as radically different as this one, they tend to have fundamental design flaws. Think of something, for instance, like the Nismo LM car. The front engine, front wheel drive, LMP vehicle, totally different to anything else in the field, and as cool as it is as a concept, it just didn't work. This car is similar. It's a performance car, but it's not really a performance car at the same time. It has performance if you want it, but it's not really designed for breaking lap records or even going particularly quick in a straight line or around corners. So when I tuned this car and found out that actually the handling on this thing is surprisingly good, really shocked me. Well, as I said, it was surprisingly good. Now, what do you actually get? Because many people probably haven't even looked at this car in the dealership, let alone actually bought one and spent the roughly $250,000 credits to fully tune this thing. Well, for 47 grand, you get a naturally aspirated 3.5 litre engine. Of course, it's front-mounted, rear-wheel drive, and it's surprisingly light. It's a lot lighter than it looks. It's a very tail-heavy looking car, it's got a huge back end, it's a reasonably wide vehicle, but it's not heavy, not at all. With the full weight loss package it weighs 1,063 kilos. That's really good. That's around the same kind of weight as a Zonda R. That's surprisingly impressive. And even as far as power, despite the fact that it doesn't have a turbo or a supercharger to aid it, you're still looking at 450 horsepower. That's not bad at all. That's the kind of territory that you'd expect from, say, a modified TVR or some other sports cars of that kind of caliber. That's more power, for instance, than an SRT8 Challenger or a Camaro SS, so that's potentially pretty useful. Even the torque is pretty good as well, 397 foot-pounds from, again, a naturally aspirated 3.5 litre engine is not bad at all, and the horsepower per tonne of 423 is a lot better than I would have predicted it would be from this car. The PP level is perhaps fractionally high for its own good, 520, but at the same time it's not ridiculous. It's still usable at that level. You can certainly race this car, and under the right circumstances it can definitely give you a victory. And considering that it's only a 47,000 credit vehicle, the value is potentially quite good. Now, in the straight line, it's not really anything to write home about. It is American, and American cars are known for their straight line performance. Ironically though, this car is much more of a cornering machine than a straight line one. Now, in real life, that may not be the case, but on the game, when it comes to tracks which require that flow from corner to corner, tracks such as here at Willow Springs, not start-stop circuits, but rather corners which require better throttle control, smooth steering, and allowing the car to shift its weight in a more flowing manner from corner to corner. This is a perfect example of that kind of track. Other tracks which are similar would be the Nürburgring Ring or Sierra. They have a very high-speed flow without really that many hairpins or square corners. This track really suits this car, and the car definitely suits the track. It flies around this circuit, and for its power and for its weight, it puts out some pretty good lap times. I'm not claiming that it's a class-leading vehicle, or even that it's the fastest at its PP level, but what I will say about the Prowler is to try and put aside any personal feelings or negative emotions that you might have about cars like this. And I can understand that, it's not one of my preferred vehicles, but just put that aside for a moment and give this car a try. Now, I wouldn't recommend buying it if you're looking purely for good value to buy something to use a lot, but if you've got the spare cash, or if you fancy trying something different and you already own all of the other good cars in any particular class, such as sports cars, then this one is an interesting alternative to that. It's got just enough straight line performance and definitely good enough handling for a 47 grand price to surprise a lot of people. And for me personally, the outstanding feature about this car is just how good the handling can be. So overall, it's definitely worth a look, and I'll see you guys next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.